Well, guys, today we're talking about border gore. If you do not know what border gore is, it's something that usually happens in games like Hearts of Iron 4 and EU4 and other map-based strategy games, and even games like Civilization, where border gore can exist. So here are examples of border gore in games like EU4. This is an example of border gore in EU4. And stuff like this happens in EU4. But and we have stuff like this in the border gore of games like EU4 and Hearts of Iron 4. Or something like this. Yep. But what about modern day border gore? Well, we have the redistricted maps of America, and some of these are actually approved maps. So we're going over some of these maps. So the first one is Illinois. So you're looking at the Illinois borders. You can already see there's some border gore. So let's talk about Illinois' 13th. Illinois' 13th, if it were, is a starts all the way from this part of the state, borders this district, which is entirely cut in half by Illinois' 13th. It is entirely cut out, and you look at this, it looks like a long, it's cut in to include Springfield and a bunch of like small towns. I think what would have been a more easier solution is making this one simple area just around Springfield and all the surrounding areas, instead of just making this long protrusion, which cuts this one all the way in half. It would actually look like a country's actually just bordering some small country that's trapped inside of it, kind of like Lesotho and Swaziland and San Marino. Illinois' 12th, there isn't really anything wrong with Illinois' 12th, but then we get up here, Illinois' 17th. So Illinois 17th is just bad. They basically included Rockford, and then they excluded all of this random small town, all these random small towns. You compare it to the old map. This is the original one. This one is much more clean than the actual one they actually made. So they actually made the map even worse, and this was the original one for Springfield's district. It's still not good, but it's still better. No, but it still doesn't cut a district in half like the original one did. We compare it to the new map. This was the original map. And this one, and then we have Illinois' 14th. But then we have now, Illinois' 14th is now all the way down here. And it basically cuts into all these really small rural areas here as well. But then we have stuff like this. Illinois, then we have Chicago. Illinois' first is a prime example of bad border gore. And Illinois' second. Illinois' second has a very large swath of rural area, but cuts into a small part of the southern portion of Chicago. Same thing of Illinois' first, basically. So Illinois' first has this massive panhandle that basically sneaks into parts of Chicago. And of course we have this border gore inside the city itself. The worst of them all is Illinois' third. Illinois' third basically has this part here, which would be green blue, but it stretches all the way into Chicago. Then we have this one here, Illinois' 5th and Illinois' 9th. This is just exceedingly bad examples of border gore. For example, this part of Illinois' 9th is completely just connected by one narrow small bit of space to the rest of the district in Illinois' 5th. Illinois' 10th also is like up here, but it's not as bad as all of this. So there we go. We're done about talking about Chicago's border gore, and the old map with Chicago wasn't much better. For example, Illinois' 4th is just so cursed. But now let's look at the state of Texas. Yep, this is the state. Okay, let me click. This is the state of Texas. You would say, oh, it doesn't look that bad. But then we have, we're going to go to Dallas area. So this is one district, Texas 4th. Texas 4th is thus cursed. Okay, we have this large area which is mostly like rural areas here, but then we have a small dip into the Dallas suburbs here and here. It's just, this makes this Texas 3rd look even worse because it's basically mostly states by Texas 4th, Texas 5th, which is just a clean border, and Texas 23rd. And of course, we have the terrible borders of Dallas. Texas is 6th, basically stretches into basically suburban Dallas. We also have Texas's 33rd, which basically is this area that basically stretches throughout the whole area into Dallas and into rural areas to try to make it less obvious. Texas's 30th is also pretty bad, but it's not as bad as Texas's 23rd, Texas 25th, and Texas's 6th. Texas's 24th is another really bad one. We have this more rural area, then we have a bunch of patches in the suburban areas. Yeah. We also have Texas's 25th and Texas's 12th, which are also pretty bad and egregious. This. Texas's 1st is not that great either, and Texas's 5th. Here is much more clean border, except for Texas 17th, random weird panhandle. And Texas's 10th is another really cursed area. The rest of Texas's 10th is basically connected by a small, really tiny border. And of course we have the worst, Texas's 45th. Texas's 45th is mostly San Antonio and Austin. So they basically said, you know what, let's stretch all the way over here to San Antonio and all the way back to Austin. And then Houston's, it basically is similar to Chicago's type of border gore. But it do has far worse border gore in this whole state. We have random protrusions out of Houston, basically separating Texas's 22nd. And we have, of course, there. But the rest of the state is pretty okay, with the exception of the cities, these maps. So, and that's it about those states. Now let's look at some older maps. Let's look at the state of California. The state of California has a new map. And of course in Los Angeles, it isn't as cursed. But California at least, their map isn't as cursed as Illinois. Yes, there's some pretty bad, some meh border gore like this. But then we have to go to Ohio. Ohio has some pretty bad border gore, and this is the last one we'll be talking about. And it's mostly concerning Cincinnati. Cincinnati, for some reason, is a part of this random block here. It is basically thinly separating two districts here, 8th and 2nd. And yeah, then we also have this area around Cleveland, which basically is a small area that stretches into Cleveland's area, into Cleveland's borders here. Basically making this small area in Cleveland its own lone area. Then we have the previous map of Ohio, which has these two districts are basically just cursed. These ones are not even connected because there's a lake between them. Columbus's district is basically just one massive just cursed, where it's mostly barely connected as well. And the Cincinnati area is basically split into two districts, or has a similar one where it is barely connected. And Ohio's 14th is really bad. And Ohio's 14th. And of course we have Maryland. The state, Maryland's original districts. This is Maryland's 3rd. So Maryland's 3rd is basically Annapolis, parts of Baltimore, a bunch of more suburban areas, and basically, yeah, Maryland second, and most of Maryland is basically just really badly drawn borders. There's, but the new map has parts of Maryland's first is parts of northern Annapolis separated the rest of this district. And there's still some pretty bad ones in Maryland 4th and Maryland's 3rd. So there we go. About the today of America's border gore. Some of these ones like North Carolina's is not that bad. But you have stuff like, and you have more states having these really bad ones, like, for example, some of the ones that like proposed are pretty bad border gore-esque areas. Like some of New York's older maps were pretty bad. Like New York's older map had some pretty messy borders. But there we go about this video. Goodbye.